You can achieve a lot within 21 seconds. In physical prowess, in 2014, Marcin Kowalczyk solved a Rubik's Cube whilst blindfolded in 21 seconds as well. As recently as 2024, during a fierce rivalry football match between Celtic and Rangers, Celtic scored the first goal of the game, just 21 seconds in.
In the opening seconds!
It's short enough to sound unrealistically fast, but just long enough to remind us that every second counts. And in Final Fantasy XIV, you could use those 21 seconds to secure yourself victory in the most competitive world race in the game's history.
Just do this clean.
One more set. Every mate you have.
So
You just
we
kill it,
have
just kill it, just kill it.
Kill it. Come on.
Yes!
Are we free?
We fucking did it!
When Dawntrail Early Access released in late June of 2024, players got their first opportunity to step out into the fresh start for the franchise that the 7.0 expansion and onwards had promised. With it came a graphical revamp, fresh faces entering the leading cast, and a commitment to improving battle encounter design, and Square Enix hoped that this would continue the extended state of success the MMO was enjoying. Initial impressions were mixed. Such a tonal shift from the roller coaster of emotions that was Endwalker was inevitable. But even despite this, many players were not engaged with the slice of life-esque introductory zones. Jobs 2 received little in the way of significant gameplay adjustments, resulting in a third expansion more than half a decade, where many of the now 21 mainline combat jobs possessed for the most part an identical playstyle. What received a far more glowing review, however, was the new dungeon and trial battle content on offer. It was clear that long-standing critiques had been reflected upon, and that the development team was no longer afraid to allow the player base to fail, even in what for all intents and purposes were easy duties. Leveling dungeons had distinctly sped up boss encounters, content to integrate more moving parts and tighter timings than they would have before. This was well received by the majority of players, the perfect challenge for them to bite into, and more than that, a sign of what was to hopefully come further along the road. The launch trial offerings of Valigar Manda and Zoralja doubled down on this new design philosophy, one a solid test of fundamentals with some absolutely peak set pieces, the other a puzzle-based encounter with multiple viable solutions. With all of this in mind, it was clear that the impending raid tier was going to be one to watch. The Arcadian was Final Fantasy XIV's very own tournament arc. Combatants wielded feral souls to amplify their abilities, transforming their bodies and turning every bout into a spectacle. 3 weight classes in order of release: Light-Heavyweight, Cruiserweight, and finally Heavyweight. They lent into the aesthetic fully with themed arenas, original and striking boss designs, and even a play-by-play announcer that would offer commentary on the current state of the battle.
Oh dear, the challenger has fallen out of the ring.
Fun, frenetic, and utterly memorable. These two were lauded for not being afraid to throw punches, but more than anything they served to raise question marks as to how their savage forms would play out. This tier would be the first world race in over a year, and in that time teams had disbanded, reformed, and painstakingly practiced. The advent of 7.0 was an opportunity for them to prove themselves, a fresh start, ripe with a new bounty. As game day approached, the race was on to garner every little piece of relevant information from the normal modes. How does this mechanic target? Can it be baited and utilised in the Savage variant? This animation is too flashy to be so simple. What information can be gleaned to gain an advantage? What would make sense to happen thematically as a build-up from this phase? Theory crafting ran rampant. This same level of thought bled into composition picks too. The introduction of 2 new jobs, Pictomancer and Viper, was extremely impactful due to the overwhelming power that the former could bring to bear.
We knew Picto was absurd, but we were only going to use it if we needed it.
It had a simple core rotation with a high level of flexibility, capable of providing movement and burst damage on demand to deal with threats. Its unique defensive could now be converted into a raid-wide shield, and it did all of this whilst outputting not only the most DPS within the caster role by a country mile, but surpassing every other job in the entire game. Groups wanted it in their lineup, but doing so would sacrifice the all-important third raise unless they gave up their second melee. Job swaps would need to be fast and thoughtful, depending on what they came up against.
Just like, do we want to keep a res or not? I was playing Summoner and Picto, whereas Kyo was playing Red Mage and Melee, and in this tier, I believe Picto was just stronger than all the melees. So to swap to Picto was not losing the Red Mage res, so there was not really any downside to it in a lot of cases.
The favourites going into this tier were undoubtedly Echo Esports, previously Neverland, having recently been absorbed by one of the premier World of Warcraft organisations. With previous wins in Dragon Song's Reprise and Anabasios and close calls in the rest of Endwalker's offering, they were the group to watch. And for the first time ever, you could. Thanks to their new ownership, the group was committed to streaming their progression for the first time ever with a professionally produced, live-casted streaming event on Echo's main channel. Across the pond, Lucrezia had returned in full force, one of the most storied names in FF14 history, possessing a dominant victory back in the early days of A Realm Reborn claiming world first on the final coil of Bahamut. Lucrezia periodically rise seemingly like a phoenix with a world-class roster before fading away once more. In Dawntrail, they were back, and the Japanese lineup had their sights set firmly on first place as a statement of intent. Grind, another Japanese roster, had built up a series of accolades to bring them into prominence throughout the last expansion. With numerous top 5s from Endwalker under their belt, and over a year to improve and refine their technique, they were a dark horse that many rated highly. A newer competitor was North American team Serenity, built from a hodgepodge of veteran raiders that had accrued both respect and experience, yet were lacking the win they had long craved, as well as a couple of talented newcomers eager to prove themselves.
This was the end of Endwalker, and I had pretty much taken all of Endwalker off from World Racing. I had the urge to play again, I really wanted to race, I wanted to win, and I wanted to play in a group that I thought could viably win. I didn't want to spend time on a group that didn't care to win or didn't have the capability to win.
This international roster was set to compete as well. Whilst their ceiling at this point was uncertain, those in the know expected their bag of tricks to contain hidden depths.
A lot of the people in the group have had second place, third place, fourth place, but pretty much everyone thinks that that doesn't matter. It's if you're not first, then there's no point.
But these four would undoubtedly not have a clear run at the gold. More teams than ever were forming, practicing and committing the hours to push harder than ever before. Savage Racing is an utterly different beast to the marathons of ultimates like Dragon Song's Reprise or the Omega Protocol. They are a sprint, and often when it comes to modern tiers, if you take a break to sleep, you've already lost. Good for those that only want to commit a day or two and try their hardest before returning to a normal schedule, but bad for those wanting their 8 hours a night. Soon enough, game day would arrive. As morning broke on July 30th, 2024, groups groggily woke up, ate breakfast and shook off the nerves, hopping in calls together and awaiting the savage release that would toll the beginning of the race.
I was pretty nervous. That was the first time I had been in a group with such high aspirations that like actually felt realistic.
I was pretty nervous too.
Before my groups had been like, oh yeah, we're gonna win, we'll win this race, but it's like it never felt real until this one, right?
A last-minute balance adjustment came with it, buffing the damage output of many weaker jobs like Summoner, Red Mage, and Ninja. For some, this would confirm that their composition choices were solid. For others, it would trigger a last-minute reshuffling. But there was no more time to ruminate on it. The stage was set. The next race for World First was here, and as the servers went live, the clock began ticking. Black Cat acts as the guard at the entrance of Light-Heavyweight, and it became quickly apparent that she was all about memory mechanics. Even the first minute of the fight sets up this expectation, as she unleashes sets of cleaves either on players or the arena at large in sequence, and then later on repeats them, requiring players to remember their order or position to find safety in amongst the telegraphs. Despite being fast, world progression groups barely even stumbled when up against them, with many breaking through in just a handful of attempts, using a mixture of intuition and slapstick strategies that just do the job. What waited for them afterwards was the first premier mechanic of the Arcadian raid series, reshaping the arena itself as challengers were tasked with desperately keeping the few safe tiles they had left.
But it's a ton of theory crafting, and to spoil a little bit, that's why Black Cat died so fast for us, is because we almost had everything theorized ahead of time.
The combo of Red Mage and Summoner was absolutely rampant right out the gates, owing in no small part to the fact that Dawntrail battles thus far had been designed lacking any real hard body checks, resulting in them being extremely recoverable. Thanks to this duo, teams were running a grand total of 4 raised players, and using powerful tank defensives such as cover and intervention to keep those valuable members alive as long as possible, cutting down on pull counts. Instead of practicing one mechanic with a fresh pull, they'd be afforded the opportunity to reach, solve, and practice 2, 3, or maybe even more. It was efficient, and it cut the challenge these early fights could present drastically. You lost damage, but damage was never a constraining factor in these early turns. All that was really necessary was surviving. Before Dawntrail had launched, there had been a large dialogue between the player base and development team on whether casters needed to maintain the capability to combat raise, or if removing it would better the overall health of encounter design. The end result had been no, maintain the status quo. But as Black Cat's health points drained away with each rapid attempt, it certainly provided a little food for thought. The arena change mechanic presented the first moments that allowed competitors to break away from the pack, albeit momentarily. Clones of the boss appear on the edge of the room and will either slam down on their chosen target or knock them up and forward with an attack called Enervate and Eviscerate, and the victim will need to position accordingly to end up on a safe, uncracked tile. The rest of the group will need to adjust around it, creating space and avoiding the shockwaves. But there was a hidden trick here that one group, Serenity, clocked onto immediately that others wouldn't grasp until far later.
We had already known and practiced the fact that, like, the kick, you could stay within the tile if you go diagonaling. Like, we noticed that really early on, and we're just, like, practicing doing that. We were also, like, looking a lot at, like, patterns of the floor breaking, which ended up not mattering.
Instead of tracking the different patterns and animations, they could be completely ignored by just standing right in the corner of a safe tile and being knocked diagonally across it. This tiny but smart change reduced the mechanic into a static, simple affair that didn't require any learning. With it, they broke through into the second half of the encounter at a blinding pace.
We've definitely been drilling, and over the last expansion, that and you're seeing a mechanic for the first time, you need to be able to discern like all the necessary information from that first floor. So we try to make sure people are positioning well enough that you can see proximity bits a lot of the time when you're seeing a mechanic for the first time.
It's important to note one of the main separations between Savage and Ultimate Progression. Savage is by and large far less punishing, so understanding and solving a mechanic correctly is much less important for these groups than just surviving it is. If you live, you can progress, and that's all that matters. If you aren't wiped for failure and you can just mitigate through it, you're not being punished. This attitude and a shared understanding of how to achieve it quickly between members on a team was what dictated whether a team would speed through the next section or stumble at it.
A hidden quality too is like being, we call it a soldier. Someone that isn't so focused on the strategy, but they're like the more consistent players. They can do the mechanics, still perform the highest level of damage, things like that.
The early theme of memory puzzles that will have clones repeat their attacks reaches a crescendo here, as Black Cat will carry out multiple attacks as well as movements around the arena, assigning them to clones to repeat both later on. To get through cleanly, it was necessary to remember both and which clone they are linked to, and then carry out each in sequence later on. But this circles back to punishment. Failing some of these components didn't even give a damage down nor immediate death. Instead, they rewarded a painful damage over time that healers could mitigate and heal through. So, with some smart play, this entire set piece could be skipped through with just rudimentary learning, and for many, this is exactly what happened. Black Cat Savage was clearly winding down at this point. After a second broken tile phase, many were discovering her to be in kill at any moment range. But she wasn't going to give up easily, and right at the end were 2 tests designed to eat chunks of time from those who couldn't quickly understand and deal with them. The first was Raining Cats, featuring 2 tethers that needed to be traded between its multiple attacks, and 2 range-baited stacks that needed to be shared by the leftovers. Groups on-stream and off-stream solved this at practically the same time, neck and neck with one another going into Mouser, an amped-up version of the normal mode mechanic of the same name that just involved memorizing the boss hops and avoiding attacks. And if they made it through that, Enrage was there, just waiting for them. But this was a challenge that many decided to just not deal with. With the boss so low, on a clean run, even on day 1, Mouser could be skipped, and on those less than ideal pulls, they followed the rule of the 3 M's. Mitigate, mitigate, and mitigate.
That's what deploy is for.
Mass
been a
DC'd
pull
in Black
earlier.
Cat, and then we 1% enraged on that pull. That he was gone. He was literally gone for half the pull. Like, he DC'd and just did not reconnect until after the pull ended. And we like 1% enraged, so we would have killed it like 10-15 minutes earlier.
Serenity built upon their momentary lead from earlier and claimed first place on M1S just 56 minutes after Light-Heavyweight Savage released. It took them less than an hour to figure everything out here, make strats, and blitz through it.
Jesus.
Let's
Nice.
go. Let's fucking do. Neverland's still working on it.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Are we first?
We cleared it 20 minutes ago.
You put it 20 minutes ago, yeah.
Everyone,
So true.
everyone
leaves.
seriously.
If your
Everyone
name,
leave except Charlie.
if your name is
Charlie,
not
do not
Charlie
leave.
D. Break, you leave the instance.
Oh no, we lost an entire right side.
We're getting there next.
They, like many others, utilised double raise casters to their advantage here, and whilst they were an off-stream team so others wouldn't share in the reward, their prize would be to be the first group in the world to step into the second floor, M2S.
Tiff, our other tank, he solved that in one pull. Like, the second we saw it, he was like, these look like they target the furthest and closest, and we're just like, okay, let's just try that. And then it was right, and we basically killed it very quickly after. And from what I understand, other groups struggled a lot with that because they couldn't figure out what it was doing.
We have a whole spreadsheet of what you should look for, what you prioritize getting information from, and how to not get baited, because it's easy to get baited on distance mechanics. So ones like that are the hardest ones.
They wouldn't be there alone for long though. World Second was hot on their heels as Japanese group Kryl would join them just 15 minutes later, claiming an altogether different title for themselves. The first streamed clear of M1S. Within a minute of second place, third would also be claimed by North American static Unwind, and at that moment, the floodgates would open. Whilst many of the heavy hitters hadn't been quite as quick on the uptake in comparison with Serenity here, a sub 30-minute lead can easily dissolve in the face of one single roadblock later in the tier, and whilst rosters like Echo and Lucrezia didn't get a podium finish here, they were joining their competitors in moving on to M2S just a handful of minutes later. The race was well and truly on, and speaking to the level of practice and effort invested in the downtime, it was hard to see any clear-cut leader pulling away from the pack at this point.
Let's get into 2 and start pulling. that was the only thought.
Just keep going. Getting first, that's really good. Like, we're kind of meeting our expectation or our goals, and just keep it going.
Just historically, our groups have been way better at the first fight or the first 2 fights. So I was expecting to get first and then not like let that go to my head, because I feel like the later 2 fights are going to be harder for our group specifically.
The star of Light Heavyweight's second turn is Honeybee Lovely, a super idol with a sting that mixes puzzles with chaotic intuition phases, all to a sickly sweet backing track that turns every potential raid disagreement into a hilarious outtake. There was one phase in particular that people were looking out for, either with dread or excitement, or most likely a mixture of the two. There's no real strategy here, nor any truly consistent pattern you can learn. It's literally a case of dodge attacks and don't get hit. Simple at its core, but it's fast, and it breaks many of FF14's core raiding rules that have stuck for so very long. For many, it was a breath of fresh air, and most were eager to see the structure they assumed the Savage version would bring to this mechanic. As groups began to funnel in, they would quickly learn that M2S had aped an interesting style of punishment from an old FF14 raid long forgotten. A number of the encounter's core challenges revolve around these hearts that float above each party member's head. Certain attacks that need to be soaked will fill up one or more of these hearts, and the challenge revolves around equally splitting heart gauge to avoid any one player reaching the maximum and overcapping. If that does happen though, and it can all too easily as the result of one single misposition, Honeybee Lovely will make them her drone, immobilizing them for a few seconds and gaining a stack for the rest of the fight. Each stack will heal her health by about 1% and increase her damage dealt for the remainder of the attempt. So each major mess up will not only likely spell a player death, it will also heal the boss and increase her damage output. Whilst that sounds rough, this opens up the opportunity for great play to overcome even this sequence of debuffs. And it just so happened that a number of groups capable of just that were about to be knocking at her door.
We saw to the end on pull 2?
Yes, so Honeybee Lovely is one of those ones where you can see the whole fight in like one pull basically, and then now you have to decide what to do with that.
The first half of the battle was simple enough. Spreads and pairs with varying safe spots signified by different honey patterns and unique cast bars, followed by the first beat utilizing the heart gauge, which was simple enough to deal with in terms of solving its puzzle. There was a hint of the madness from normal mode as dozens of hearts spilled from the center and edges alike, forcing adjustment with every pull, but it wasn't nearly as strenuous as many had expected. But then, about halfway through, came the mechanic that most would come to remember above practically any other, not just from M2S, but from the light heavyweight raid tier at large. Alarm pheromones. The promised chaos was here in full force. There was nothing complicated about it. Drones would spawn from the edge and shoot line AoEs into the arena, and Warriors of Light just needed to avoid them. But they came in such numbers at such speed that it was all too easy to become overwhelmed.
Are you meant for himself?
What is this bullshit?
This was clearly an execution fight through and through, but whilst such design would make it a bit of a mess for the party finder, this is exactly what cutting-edge teams love to see. The quicker they could decipher it, the faster they would break through, and that's exactly what happened.
You either go piece by piece and talk about every single mechanic in the whole fight, or you just pull again because you don't think that's absorbable if you do the whole fight in one pull.
Within just 30 minutes of Serenity's Black Cat world first kill, forerunning teams like Japanese outfit Grind and North American-based Aether Group 3 passed everything here, diving headfirst into the tail end of the battle. Whilst this was great for them, they couldn't get complacent for even a single moment, as a dozen other teams were close on their tails.
I think once you have done enough fights, you get pretty good at knowing what might happen. There's a lot of times that you can't guess like what's gonna happen. Like it's just gonna be a completely new mechanic, something new added. But like you have a plan from pull 0 to what you want to try, because it might do this.
More beat phases would follow, each with their own puzzles based on the concept of avoiding capping the heart gauge, but none of it posed too much of an issue. Stacks, spreads, deformations that needed to be taken at the edge, and towers. Really, it's mostly reconfigurations of what you've seen before, all culminating in Rotten Heart. This is a unique enrage sequence with debuffs that must be merged with one another, and when they do so, a huge explosion of damage results. You need to decide when to take them, walking the tightrope of not being too fast or too slow, mitigating and healing appropriately to provide as much space and time as possible. At the end of all that, enrage is all that's left. The progression on this floor was absolutely wild. Ride didn't just pass the first half within half an hour, they defeated the entire turn in just 49 minutes, claiming world first at 1:02 PM British summertime. They were by no means the first team to get into the fight after beating Black Cat, not even clabbering into the top 3 there, and despite 20 minutes less on M2S compared to some of their competitors, they absolutely blitzed this fight to emerge in pole position. It's genuinely impressive. Honeybee Lovely wasn't particularly complex, but it still demanded a respectable level of execution to see far enough in and eventually kill, which these top teams so far surpassed that it wasn't even funny. They were not alone though. Not content to stay in the shadows, pre-race favourites Echo Esports swatted the B a single minute later, claiming second place as well as being the first stream group to clear the fight. They were in a similar situation to Grind. In fact, they cleared M1S 1 minute slower and M2S 1 minute slower, ranking their performance on the second turn as literally identical to their competitor. Long-term North American powerhouse Aether Group 3 claimed bronze shortly after, with just 7 minutes separating first place and third. Just like M1S, this clear acted as the dam breaking on the race, as Clear started flying in hot and heavy in the subsequent minutes. Lucrezia and Serenity would be amongst them, knowing full well that really, all of this was just a prelude to what was to come next.
So we basically spent like 20 minutes like going over the whole fight and like just going through it. So like that wasn't great. So we took longer talking about it than we probably should have, like, and discounted like familiarity with just like executing mechanics. And then after that, we ended up just like wiping to mistakes.
So when we were watching, we were prepping to be first, right? We were watching other groups, seeing how they progged. We could see like, we go through all their errors, be like, this one shouldn't have happened, this one shouldn't have happened. And then, so in that prog, we definitely had like a handful of our own that we would have wanted to cut.
I have to make it clear that this kind of pace is not standard, even for a Savage race. Whilst the first turn is defeated at breakneck speed, almost always somewhere around the 1 hour mark, traditionally the second turn amps things up and requires a bit longer. 2 turns in 2 hours is fast, and everybody competing knew it. Savage is a sprint rather than a marathon, but it was becoming apparent that this sprint could well be decided by just a handful of pulls. Or, in a nightmare scenario, even less. In the second half of Light Heavyweight, the challengers must first pass the Brute Bomber, who acts as the gatekeeper to the final turn. The champion of the entry division, this bomb-toting wrestler was known for fighting dirty, and he would show his tricks early in the encounter in both normal and savage, knocking out the referee bot and consuming a doping draft to improve his physicality and strength of his feral soul.
Don't mind me, throat's a bit parched.
This duel was, at its core, an incredibly strict fundamental FF14 raid. Lots of cast bar and animation recognition, as he would use this or that attack with X or Y animation, building up to a handful of different permutations that teams needed to develop set positions to deal with. In fact, that's exactly what Grind and Echo came face to face with on their first pulls, when they had those few moments to themselves with the encounter before the competition came rushing in. Aside from these, the core tenet of Brute Bomber's battle revolves around fuses that have various effects. Sometimes, it'll come in the form of floating bombs with different lengths of fuse that will explode in sequence, forcing parties to shuffle through safe spots in order. At others, the fuses will come on the party members themselves, and they'll need to spread out at different times based on the fuse lengths. A third variation a little later on will place debuffs on players, as well as fuses on the ground, and just like in old cartoons where the protagonist must leap on the fuse to prevent it reaching the bomb, the challengers must do the same one by one to prevent a catastrophic explosion. Each of these little puzzles were interesting and innately intuitive, and groups solved them quickly. A couple of Savage additions rounded out this combustible arsenal, including a phase with multiple knockback towers back to back, leading to this visual smorgasbord of people bouncing around all over the place, desperately trying to stick to their predetermined pairs and stacks whilst avoiding the walls crackling with their flames, and the bombers' own incoming attacks as well. There's also Chain Deathmatch, which happens twice, each time adding more chains and new factors to worry about. Those chains would force the one bound by them to fail specific indicators while still succeeding the rest, setting up this interesting shifting of prioritization in finding safe spots for a moment or two. All the while, hitting the challengers with some of the most hilarious quips from out of left field.
I'll blow you to smithereens.
Honestly, these voice lines were a highlight for many, bringing memorability and character in spades. But really, Brute Bomber's Savage variant wasn't as different from the normal as many had hoped, and thanks to the abundance of preparation that frontrunners had committed to, they had no issue chipping away at the boss health consistently as each pull went by. The tier had been flying by so far, and whilst the third turn would usually stop up aggression for at least a handful of hours, that didn't seem like it was the case when it came to light heavyweight. This was a realization that viewers and more casual raid enjoyers were quickly coming to as well, and discussion began to emerge on forums that this raid tier might be over and done with a little sooner than anybody had quite anticipated. Often, Savage raid tiers take 1 or 2 days for World First to emerge. That is, often somewhere past the 20-hour mark and before the 41. Some are a bit short, others a little longer, but the pace was so blindingly fast this time that a monumentally quick race could well be the result. But this also spoke to the metaphorical arms race that had taken place between previous expansions and Dawntrail. Teams had grown in size and experience as races went by, recruiting support members to provide support to the playing team in the form of callouts, diagramming, and aid in creating strategies. Some support members would collect samples of mechanics from the streaming opposition as well as the team's own pulls to more consistently figure out how each puzzle targets party members.
For context, going into M3 we were behind, right? Like we killed 2 a little slow, some streams were on 3 already. So we had people like watching streams so that could like tell us like what we were missing. And we got misinformation about how certain mechanics worked. And the problem with misinformation is like it's like worse than going in blind because you just like have certain assumptions that you need to later undo. Could just notice the first time blind if you just were going into it with an open mind.
Some of the heavy hitters even had proprietary software to improve their efficiency. A tentpole example being a rumor that Echo had access to a video system to allow them to rapidly compile, review, and splice video clips to improve the efficiency of their support team. Critical mass was coming closer and closer. The previously secretive progression race had well and truly emerged from the shadows too, with many of the best teams in the world streaming their progression openly for all to see. A stark contrast from just 2 expansions ago, where such a thing was nigh on unheard of. This shift came with many positives, but it did have the side effect of expediting any potential clear even further. The second any team at the front discovered a new mechanic or piece of key information, it would immediately be proliferated to all of their competitors. It was difficult to maintain any kind of informational advantage over the opposition, and what this meant more than anything else was that the team able to execute more consistently than anyone else was in good shape to claim first in the world race.
And then the other thing that we struggled with was the last mechanic called, we call it Ember Twirl, but I forget what it's actually called.
I have no idea. It's the one thing you run in a cycle, but like
we call it Ember Twirl, and like I think our strat was more complex than it needed to be, but that's like kind of typical for day 1 strats. So I do a lot of like the strat making explanations. I have never used a whiteboarding program before that tier. Looking back, like I know one thing was like I did a lot of like audible explanations with like maybe some in-game movements or just like paint diagrams, but like we have a lot of assets available to us in Miro, just like pre-made like squares and circles and like the arena pictures, for example. And it's like if we use that to explain the strategy for that mechanic, we probably would have gone through it a lot faster because we wiped to it more than a couple times, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we definitely had the most like individual errors in that fight then. Like a lot more than our normal, I guess.
The Brute Bomber quickly overtook both Black Cat and Honeybee Lovely when it came to survival time, passing the hour mark without so much as an enrage pull from any stream team, nor a clear screenshot from an off-stream group. But that wouldn't last long. Soon enough, the enrages would come in. Not because the fight had a demanding DPS check, but because it was so recoverable that even attempts that messed up many of the late stage mechanics were still able to stumble along to the end. At 2:39 PM BST, just 97 minutes after the world first defeat of Honeybee Lovely, a stream team managed to take down the Brute Bomber. This time around, it was Cryle, that same Japanese roster that took silver on M1S, mounting an impressive comeback from being outside the top 5 in M2 to leaving the 3rd turn in pole position. But they wouldn't be leaving the turn alone. 1 minute later, Grind took 2nd place. 4 minutes after that, Echo locked in 3rd, and another singular minute later, Lucrezia claimed 4th. 6 minutes ago, not a single team had bested M3S, and yet now suddenly 4 had moved on all at the same time in the same number of overall pulls. At this point there is generally a clear frontrunner, or at a push maybe 2. They'll have sometimes even an entire hour or more of uncontested learning on the 4th turn. Here, every second counted as the competition advanced onto the final and greatest test that Light Heavyweight had waiting for them. By all rights, Wicked Thunder shouldn't even be here. A competitor from the heavyweight division gone missing returned to duel the newly crowned light heavyweight division champion. Us. From moment 1, the division in skill and prowess between her and those that came before was clear. Raid wides were hitting harder, mechanics were suddenly much less intuitive, and the challenge set forth even from minute 1 as opposed to a slow ramp up with the complexity coming later on. She throws a healthy mixture of static puzzles and intuitive mechanics based on cast bar or animation at you, often intertwining the two to create cinematic set pieces that were fun to both solve and execute. At first, she'll showcase a witch hunt, as clones of herself dive on players, slamming into them and decimating their health pool, and then those that were not initially attacked will need to bait the follow-ups. This was easy enough for groups to get through and acted as tutorialization for the infamous challenge that would follow. Next came the real witch hunt, combining pairs of clone dives alongside donut and circle AoEs in sequence to tighten those safe spaces. Each time, 2 had to soak the dives for the team, keeping their danger away from the rest of the group. This mechanic is worth mentioning because despite being so early in, it became a linchpin that would act as a gatekeeper to the rest of the encounter, and teams that were able to consistently get through it would be the ones that carefully considered the risk their strategy presented. With a bad strategy, one misstep spelt an almost certain wipe. A pair of puzzles followed, testing pattern recognition and showcasing the boss's titular thunder abilities, and each of these posed no real problem. Busters, spreads, and cleaves. Then came Electron Stream, the arena collapsing underneath Wicked Thunder's cannon attacks as she uses Electrope to its fullest. Coloured debuffs and icons would dictate which side of the blast to soak, and where to stand within that small half of the newly shaped arena to bait cleaves and avoid donuts from one another and the other side safely. It seemed overwhelming, and on first glance it absolutely was, but a lack of variance made it rapid to pin down. Progression speed slowed down dramatically here. There was to be no sub 2 hour clear of M4S, as was the case with the other 3 turns of the tier. That much was clear. As a barometer, traditionally roughly 50% of the overall time in a raid tier is spent in that final turn in order to obtain a clear. And if that metric were to remain true even down to the letter in this case, a clear of M4S would take somewhere in the 3 hours and 30 minutes to 4 hour region. Despite the barrage of puzzles thrown at frontrunners by this point, and the clock ticking past the hour mark quickly throughout all of it, Wicked Thunder's health still sat at around the 70% mark. It was still early days. At this point, many groups were still utilising double raise casters, some fielding Summoner and Red Mage as a pair, and others, such as was the case for Lucrezia, had swapped over to double Red Mage to maximise on their capability to dual cast Raise immediately, even at the cost of their potential limit break gauge. They would clearly change back when closer to a clear, but they considered this a powerful prog tool.
I mean, playing from behind never feels great. I personally have had the experience though, and been able to make up a lot of time. And in Pandemonium 4, we made up I think it was an hour and a half. So for me personally, it was just we can very easily catch up, but playing from behind never feels great.
Yeah, I think in Wicked Thunder we caught up immediately. It was the first 2 pulls or something like that. We were already where the leading groups were.
Obviously now we know that M4 was extremely fast. At the time, you think about other fourth fights that are typically longer. It's there's a large amount of time that can be gained here. 30 minutes is nothing in the scheme of a fourth fight.
The pulls continued, the time kept rolling by, and slowly but surely, the boss health whittled away. Clean pulls were seen of Witch Hunt, of both Electro puzzles, and of Electron Stream, one by one. Then, something new.
Wait, is it?
New music. It might be a one-phase fight.
Oh, yeah, it might be a one-phase fight.
Flamethrower.
The arena changed.
What the fuck?
Yeah,
go back again?
Oh, this is cool.
Just keep going back and forth. Just keep going back and forth.
No one's seen this on stream, by the way.
Back and forth.
We're the first to see this on stream.
Oh, there's
what?
I'm going out.
Oh, fucked.
Guys, you just go back.
We have OB. We have OB. We have OB. We have OB. We have OB.
I exited. Dodge.
I have the master crazy.
Back and forth, go!
I'm so good at this.
Back and forth, keep going.
Is this a
Geo, get a Geo, Rezo.
Oh, you're right. I was going back and forth.
Oh shit, I'm good.
We're partners.
Oh my god, stop.
Spreads, right?
I cannot.
Keep getting people up, just keep going.
North south.
Whoa, what the
Wait, what the fuck is happening? I'm trying to
Oh,
reach myself. Diff, flip.
She's getting
What the fuck is going on?
Okay.
No. I don't think she's going to get OB.
You get to knock to the other platform.
Oh my.
Knock to the other platform.
Okay, we need to figure that out.
Begins! Something is growing from her body! She's taken Electro into her body and unleashed the new fellow soul!
Many teams fell here as they saw this for the first time, but they all knew innately what it was. This was a transition. The fourth encounter in FF14 raids generally take one of two forms nowadays. Two distinct bosses that are a bit shorter with a checkpoint between the two, or one lone foe with a longer runtime and different clear phase changes within it. It's always a hugely anticipated, memorable moment for players and viewers alike, and it seemed like the answer to that question would be coming very, very soon.
I think we were 50-50, weren't we? Like half of us thought it would be a
I think we
split.
just didn't know.
Yeah, I think like the thing is, it was very clear there was going to be a second phase. They always do that, but also in normal mode there was that other arena on the minimap, and we're just like, clearly Savage is going to use this. It's just there on the minimap. It's like it's a rectangle that you can see that like should be accessible, but it's just not in normal mode. It's like clearly this is going to be a thing. The question is if it's a checkpoint or not, and we had no idea.
Oh, he just got thrown to another platform. Understood. Oh, you can see her in the background as well.
Ooh! There we go!
Damn,
Look at that transition!
No checkpoint, no easy way out. Consistency was going to matter here more than ever before. Immediately after the arena-changing transition, the newly embiggened Wicked Thunder smashes the raid, dealing so much damage that every team seeing the attack blind for the first time was utterly decimated. Many immediately determined that this must be a tank limit break 3 moment, and using it made the attacks much more survivable, but surprisingly, still hard hitting owing to the fact that the limit break couldn't cover every hit. This next segment is where players would be weighing up their options for a Pictomancer swap. Once they were facing down the final few mechanics, a decision between extra damage and continued raises, and the confidence of the team in their caster's ability to adapt to a new job without slowing down the push forwards. The second caster too, would they be swapping to a melee DPS for extra output, or staying on the raise? Considering how close the race had been thus far, a job swap at the perfect time could well be the difference maker between winning and losing.
Even if you're ahead, which we were in the fourth fight, you never know if like you got a specific pattern, or like a different group is just like doing a strat that's better than yours, and it's like worth switching. At the end of the day, like as much as I hate it, like if you want to win, like the information you get from other group streams is very powerful.
Yeah, even if it's like 90% of it's not useful to you, it's like if there's that one thing that is, like in Uwu World First, they couldn't figure out the Titan how to wake up Titan until someone did it on a stream.
What nobody had really expected was just how quickly the layers would peel back on Wicked Thunder's second phase. Some easily dodged extra flares came first, and after they were passed, a pair of tank buster tethers with debuffs that needed to be traded, whilst the rest of the group dispersed. Knockbacks and tail spikes triggering massive unsafe shockwaves. Simple, quick to learn. After that, clones, some wielding the same cannons the boss herself used earlier, others with the wings from the very start of the encounter. These correlated to different telegraphs, and the team would need to avoid them in pairs or spreads, in between dodging multiple clone half-room attacks, as well as telegraphs from the main Wicked Thunder herself. But the individual steps were simple, and far enough apart from one another to be easy to learn. There was no tight execution check here, no unintuitive puzzle that took a bunch of time and attempts to decipher. It was literally what you see is what you get. The arena splits again, then towers and lightning attacks to memorize and avoid. This entire second half had just gone by so quickly. Kill range was approaching. There were 1 or 2 more mechanics at most, and phases were already starting to repeat. What was happening? Surely M4S wasn't just going to end like this, with a whimper, without putting up a fight. But, like divine intervention, there was one more major test left for them. Sunrise Sabbath. Wicked Thunder had been periodically casting Sabbaths throughout the entire second phase of the fight, and whilst each had been fairly straightforward up until now, Sunrise brought back the puzzle elements that had been so strong in the earlier stages that teams had learnt just a few hours ago. Fitting, in a way, that the Sabbaths, named after the day of rest in many Abrahamic religions, would be the final trial the best FF14 statics in the world would face up against after a full day of playing their hardest under the utmost focus. The Electron Stream cannons were back, complete with their coloured polarities, and this time the correctly debuffed members of the group would need to bait their line AoEs safely away from one another and the unmarked people who were taking towers at the same time. The problems that stopped it being easy were twofold. Firstly, the configuration was completely random, requiring a priority system and player adjustment to work consistently. Secondly, those beams were thick. It was all too easy to overlap and murder one another unwittingly, and there didn't seem to be a nice, clean, obvious approach that left a lot of safe space with clear floor markings. So, Statics tried a few different approaches. Some opted for the simplest, just aim them directly outwards. This required the least thought and solving, but necessitated for all intents and purposes pixel spots, and it was all too easy for a beam to go awry and hit a teammate. Others tried tilting the blasts straight through the centre of the room, but this too was by no means lenient. Luckily, it didn't matter too much because a death did not spell a wipe. The punishment factor was low here, and there was enough time in between repetitions to quickly raise and recover before continuing. All that remained afterwards was a pressure check. Repeat mechanics into one standalone new challenge. Find the safe spots, go there in pairs, heal, mitigate, repeat. The first team to execute everything would be the winner, and as time crept by, it was clear that things would go down to the wire. As the stream teams approached the end, no off-stream group had been crowned. It was entirely possible that the community might well see World First on stream for the very first time. Equally, a clear could be reported from anywhere, at any moment. The state of Light Heavyweight was just so full of unknowns. There was no clear leader, no core hurdle that would spell a win or a loss, and in that uncertainty, there was excitement amongst spectators. That pressure was something every static at the forefront was feeling. The building excitement that they were in with a real shot at first. The bundle of nerves they were pressing down because the win could slip away with just a single blunder. They had to focus on their own game and play the best FF14 they've played in their lives, and there was little else to it. The most unbelievable tidbit about it all was that whoever won, and whenever the win came in, it would undoubtedly be the fastest raid tier in the game's history. There was little chance Wicked Thunder would survive past the 10-hour mark, as stream teams were facing down sub 10% pulls already, just over 8 hours since the Savage tier was even released. It could literally be any moment from now. Serenity were one team amongst many who had committed to a job swap early, subbing out Summoner and bringing in Pictomancer in M3 to give the team every chance of success. A quicker kill meant less time in that final pressure check, and the capability to take a couple of deaths and still eke out the clear. And as it closed in on midday for many of the team, who had been awake since the early hours of the morning when the tier released, which is an unfortunate downside of being an American-based team when release times perpetually favour Europe, they began another attempt. It was by no means perfect. In fact, the gear-fed samurai with dance partner took a damage down to practically the first mechanic, immediately delivering a blow to the team's damage. Shortly after the transition and entry into Phase 2, their scholar suffers a major lag spike, disconnecting at one of the most inopportune moments possible, and dying to the Exaflares as a result.
Yeah, DC.
No. Oh, he's back, he's back.
Oh, wait.
But that's okay. Perfection wasn't what they needed, and it wasn't what they were searching for. They just needed to keep going, to get in the reps, to execute as cleanly as they could. Recover, power through. They pressed through the middle section without any further incidents, dealing with Mustard Bomb, Twilight Sabbath and her clone bursts without issue. As the arena splits for towers, the samurai dies from standing a hair off of position and being caught in an AoE. But it doesn't cause a wipe, and they carry on, directly into Sunrise Sabbath.
Debuffs are coming out, and then guns and towers.
Watch your timer.
Support Northwest counter.
Support. Stay calm.
Yeah. Support Northwest counter, watch your timer.
I'm expedienting here.
Okay.
They still aren't entirely confident here. They all know what to do. They understand the theory behind the mechanic, and there's a plan to deal with it they've all agreed on, but the pulls haven't been consistently clean enough yet to claim mastery. The Scholar is blasted by a misplaced cannon, and it immediately kills them. You can hear the stress in the team comms.
No, middle. Be middle. Be middle.
Sorry.
Tower is east-west. Tower is east-west.
The Scholar is back up to take their second mechanic, but they aren't fully healed in time and go down again. But the health looks like it might just be okay. They're in kill range. If they can just get this next part right.
The only line that matters is east to west. That's the only line that matters.
Horizontal line. Go south.
Middle and back.
Go south or sides. LB.
No, okay, yeah.
Reversing? Okay.
Hold it.
Just do this clean.
Front back.
Go north or south. North or south.
One more set. Every mate you have.
And LB.
No, don't. You just kill it. Just kill it.
Kill it.
Come on.
North south.
North south.
Yes!
Yes!
Are we freeze?
Did we win?
What?
There's no way.
We fucking dead.
Yes! Light Heavyweight Savage was down. Wicked Thunder had been defeated. Serenity had cleared, though for a minute or two, nobody else would know. It would be a moment just for them. They celebrated the win, and seemingly no one else had reported a clear. No stream team had finished either. They posted the clear screenshot on Twitter with a timestamp, a custom dating back to the early days of FF14 raiding, and enjoyed the moment with their group. Soon, streams would pick up on the clear and announce their win. Congratulations would come in, and the race would be settled. Except, it wasn't.
This is what this group was formed for, and like we spent a lot of time preparing, and like it worked out. This has been like a long time goal for a lot of us, right? Like I said, I've been racing since Stormblood. This sensation of like finally I was able to do this.
10-15 minutes later we started seeing it or something like that.
Another team had reported their clear as well. There was a post up, and both Serenity's and theirs were beginning to gain traction simultaneously. The Japanese team Grind. 2 world progression statics, a world apart from one another, both competing privately without streaming, had reported M4S clears at the same time. First place and second place had been claimed, yet which one was which was not yet certain. Somehow, against all odds, they had both beaten the tier in the exact same minute.
And then, of course, it's like, oh, like, this other team posted a thing, and I remember looking at it and being like, oh, I feel like they beat us. Because I, like, looked at the, our VOD, and I was like, oh, we,
time,
like...
yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, we killed pretty late into, like, the minute, so it's like, probably they killed before us.
At the very start of this video, I stated that you can do a lot with 21 seconds. Memorable sporting moments, feats of brain or brawn have all been achieved within that time frame. It's enough time to form an optimal response, but quick enough that you can't deliberate over doing so. You have to act. And in the context of the light heavyweight world race, 21 seconds would be the difference maker between winning and losing. First and second place would be separated by just that much. In the end, community members that usually cover and catalogue the world race would get to the bottom of it using the in-game Eorzean time clock. Because the real-world time clock would only track until the nearest minute, this allowed them that additional deeper step. Grind had beaten the fight at 3:14 Eorzean time. Serenity had cleared the tier at 3:21 Eorzean time. So in the end, it was the Japanese group Grind that claimed world first on the tier, and Serenity second.
I mean, it would be a lie to say that I'm not disappointed, right? It's also hard not to think like, well, if we just did this one thing or did this other thing, like if our crafter just traded us like 30 seconds faster, like we spent like multiple minutes trying to get like all the crafted stuff from our crafters. If they just like, if we were just able to have it mailed to us, for example, it could be faster. If we didn't wipe a single time, if Maz didn't DC an M1, right?
What does say that though?
Well, I mean, it's not your fault. It's just like
Maz didn't go to the bathroom after the third.
If it was a shorter, bathroom break, if
we logged in faster.
Yeah, like there's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually,
so it's like at the same time, I think I think in the goal of winning isn't just winning to win. I actually think the goal is like, for me, the goal is actually to play so well that it's definitive that we are the best. Regardless if we win by 20 seconds or lose by 20 seconds, yeah, it would be nice to have world first under our belt, for sure. But in terms of like how we move forward and like improve, it kind of is the same either way.
That goes back to our group building too. Like our goal wasn't just to get world first, it was to get world first by a clear margin. So it was undoubtable.
Both of these squads had been neck and neck from start to finish. Serenity took first in M1S, then Grind in M2S. Neither had exited Brute Bomber in pole position, but they had climbed back up the rankings and managed to secure this photo finish of the final turn between them. Really, a competition well fought, with both deserving of praise. Bizarrely, though, this would not be the final time in the top 10 of light heavyweight's race that such meticulous tracking would be necessary. Just under 20 minutes later, 2 more teams were neck and neck for another title entirely. World First streamed clear. The groups in question were Japanese comeback team Lucrezia and pre-tier favourites Echo Esports. They both passed the finish line so closely to one another that it felt intangible, and one would be winning 3rd place, with the other missing out on a podium finish and taking 4th. In the end, the Eorzean clock worked here as well, with Lucrezia securing bronze through a 9:24 Eorzean time finish, and Echo finishing their successful last attempt at 9:32 Eorzean time. Ether Group 3, the same team that finished 3rd in Honeybee Lovely, a veteran North American roster, claimed 5th place half an hour later. Within 1 hour, the top 5 were locked. The race had indeed ended in less than 10 hours, and it would indeed be the fastest tier in FF14 history. When all was said and done, and Week 1 ticked over to Week 2, it would have the highest clear rate in the game's history as well. 952 groups in total would defeat Wicked Thunder in the first week, with 2,202 clears of Black Cat in that same time period. This likely owed to the fact that there were no clear walls of the tier. The difficulty started low and naturally scaled up at a healthy incline, and players were able to keep pace with it easily and without issue. First tiers are traditionally easier, so it's best to compare this directly with the first Savage tier that Endwalker received in Pandemonium Asphodelos. In that same Week 1 window, there were 2,398 clears of P1S, but only 546 clears of P4S. So despite there being more teams that entered the tier and bested its first challenge, there were in the end a little over half who had the time and dedication to see it through and defeat the last boss that first week. This trend is far more common, and it left many curious as to whether this shift in design philosophy and relaxation of punishment would carry onwards to future raids. Discussions would continue for quite a while on the subject of light heavyweight's difficulty. Some believed the tuning to be outright too lenient to clear, especially considering the fact that teams were easily beating all of the checks Week 1 with upwards of 4 or 5 player deaths, even in the final turn. Others retorted that they didn't like DPS checks and would prefer them to be more lenient as long as the encounters themselves were well designed and fun. Really, it was a matter of opinion, and the only arbiter as to whether the tier had been intentionally tuned or if Pictomancer and the resulting last-minute job buffs overcompensated would be Square Enix and their future checks in fights that were yet to come. When it came to the tiers, Grind would get their flowers, but going forward, they would find themselves facing up against some heated controversy soon enough, one which ended up requiring intervention from Naoki Yoshida himself to eventually settle the matter. Though deep diving on that will happen in the next World Race video I release rather than this one. Serenity would build from what they learned in this race, continue to grow together and build on their experience, and compete in future tiers in pursuit of World First. They did admirably as well, and if you watch upcoming videos about future tiers, you will absolutely hear their name again. Lucrezia would use this tier as a launching pad to build their team's brand and compete seriously to claim World First, and with the next progression being the first Dawntrail Ultimate, Futures rewritten, both they and Echo Esports were eyeing up the future as an opportunity for greatness more than anything. And that's the end of the story. Light Heavyweight set the stage for what would become, for many, including myself, one of the most enjoyable and memorable raid series FF14 has ever created. It also acted as the crucible in which a fierce competition took place, with a finish that is arguably unbelievable in just how close it turned out to be. When it came to Dawntrail raids, it was fair to say the best was yet to come. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do consider supporting my Patreon or becoming a YouTube member like these fine folk if you want to support videos like these. Members and patrons will have full exclusive access to the long-form interview with Serenity, and we talk about a bunch of stuff outside of just Light Heavyweight. And it's available tomorrow if you're watching this the day this video comes out. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day.